It's an exercise I give in the book called power mapping, which is brainstorming this whole universe of stakeholders, the obvious people, but also the less obvious ones, the gatekeepers, like the executive assistant or, the vendor who approves your purchase order, for example.
Right.
We often don't think of those people, but they have a high ability to trip us up. So brainstorming all of those, you can put these on sticky notes if it's helpful, and then mapping them on a 2x2 grid of their level of influence, so their decision-making power and their hierarchy and sway, versus their level of interest, which is how personally invested in that project are they? How much do they care about this?
Mhm.
And, as it's probably obvious that people who are high interest, high influence, you want to spend the most time with those people. You want to keep them very closely involved in the work. You're probably meeting with them more often. You're giving them more details. They have more opportunities to comment and give feedback, to touch pieces of the work. Where people often mess up is they neglect the quadrant of people who are high influence, lower interest. And that may be someone like a regulator, an FDA,
Right.
that has very high influence over your work, but they don't care about the ins and outs of
No.
the trial you're trying to get through and get approval for. They don't care. And so managing them has to look different. The way you're communicating with them is slightly more removed. It's a little more hands-off, but you're defining what stage gates or milestones do they really need to be heavily involved in, and how do they want information, and not giving them too much information or sending them every weekly update or stand-up you have. They don't care. And if you try to take the high interest approach with them, they're going to get really frustrated with you.
Mm.
And then the other quadrant is high interest, low influence. That may be someone who, for example, your direct boss may fall into that category. They may not have as much decision-making power as your VP or your CMO, for example, but they're highly invested in the day-to-day of that project.
Mm.
You don't want to neglect that group because they can be excellent advocates. They can be fantastic foot soldiers who you can give talking points to, or sample slides, and they can be presenting and spreading a message on your behalf. Now, this helps you visualize that whole ecosystem of players at a certain point in time. And this is key too, that as the project evolves, this may change. You may have someone who, for example, is low on both interest and influence at a certain stage, at the conceptualization stage of, let's say, a marketing campaign. Maybe sales is low on both of those dimensions. But once collateral is approved and you're starting to get it out in front of customers, all of a sudden, sales has gone from being low on both of those to now much higher, probably on both of those. And so it's a great exercise to be doing at different stages of your project to understand who you're influencing and what your best approach should be.